Hello, everyone, and welcome to How Zendesk Does Knowledge Management, the Evolved Loop. This is the latest in our Zendesk community events series, and the latest event on the KCS process that we do, that our self-service team does here at Zendesk. I think this is, what is this, second, third event that we've done on KCS stuff, and these are some of our most popular events. So if you haven't seen our earlier ones, we'll share some links to the recordings of the earlier KCS events because they're really fantastic stuff, and we're so happy to have our experts here. So let's go to the next slide and introduce everybody. I'm Dave Dyson here from the community team at Zendesk, and with me we've got Ben Van Eyten and Katie Doherty from the self-service team. They'll be presenting on the KCS process, and then Niall Thomas, also from the self-service team, will be joining us for the QA part of the presentation today. So next slide. Got so much great stuff to cover here. Yeah, there we go. So we'll find out all about the self-service team. They'll be touching on the solve loop, but mostly focusing on the evolve loop of KCS. And then, like I said, we'll have a QA segment here. Some housekeeping reminders. As always, yes, we're recording, and you probably by later this week, if you're registered, you'll get an email with a link to the recording. The link will also include a link to all of the Q&A information that we cover here, all the questions and all the answers, maybe even answers to questions that we don't get to live here today if we're not able to get to all of them. It will also contain links to everything that we share in the chat here today. We'll be dropping a lot of links as we go. And we may not be able to, like I said, we might not be able to answer all of the questions today. If we're not able to do that, then we will cover that in the recording there. So don't worry about that. And as always, you can share. You can watch recordings of all of our previous community events in the Zendesk community playlist of the Zendesk YouTube channel. So we'll drop a link to that there as well. If you have a question during the event, we do encourage those, and we ask that you please click over to the Q&A tab in the chat, in the sort of chat part of the window, and ask your questions there. That makes it easier for us to keep track of which questions we've answered already. If you do ask a question in the general chat, which is where everybody's telling us where you're from, we might gently nudge you over and say, can you go ask that in the Q&A section there, so that we don't lose your question, because we want to answer as many of these during the event as we can. So without further ado, I'm going to hand things over to Katie and Ben, and tell us all about this KCS evolve and solve loop stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So hi there, everyone. I'm Ben. We're going to start by taking a look at our self-service team. So if you want to go to the next slide, one of the most important things to note here is how closely embedded we are with a lot of other teams at Zendesk. We work closely with the product documentation team, with our comms teams. We try to work really closely with product in general, as we spot a lot of things that maybe could use improvement sometimes. Our data and analytics team are a huge part of what we do, but probably most importantly, our support agents. We couldn't run KCS without our support agents telling us about issues they see with articles and ideas for brand new articles. And in the middle there, you see kind of us, and we're kind of split into two wings. There's the chatbot team, which helps develop new kind of chatbot flows for our customers, kind of the first point of contact, and also update the old ones. So they're constantly maintaining those. And then the digital resources team, which we'll talk a little more on the next slide. The digital resources team is what me, Katie, and Niall are a part of. Our primary function here is to create all the things that are on this page, kind of some how-to articles, which are either kind of question and answer or kind of a problem and solution. We make videos if we think that's the best format. We also make troubleshooting guides that are kind of, you might have seen some of these in the Help Center, where you can kind of click step-by-step through, and it shows and hides some of that. We also make some in-product guides that go ahead and kind of reach a customer at the exact moment they're running into an error. Maybe it pops up and says, this is how you resolve it. We also do some automations with CSS and JSON, where probably the most handy example of this is if there's an article that's telling you how to do something in product, if you click a button, it'll take you to that exact spot in product. So that's pretty neat stuff. Yeah, if you want to move along to the next slide. And probably one of the biggest parts of what we do, and especially with my role, is KCS requires kind of a double loop process, which is solve and evolve loop. And kind of the format of what I'm about to do next is I'm going to define both loops and kind of run you through a very quick life cycle of them. And then Katie's going to go a lot more of a deeper dive into the evolve loop. So if you want to go next slide. And one more, please. So the solve loop, you just think of this as kind of your day-to-day KCS activities that your support agents are engaged in. They're capturing a customer context in the moment. We use some structured templates with straightforward language. And, you know, we have reuse here, which is one of the most important pillars here. We encourage everyone to search early and search often. So we're not duplicating anything. Our support agents are trained on that. And of course, improve. If you see something wrong, flag it or fix it. Again, I would think of this as just the day-to-day stuff that everyone's doing to kind of keep the lights on with KCS. And next slide. So I'm just going to show a really quick kind of life cycle of the solve loop here. This shows a customer writing in and saying, hey, this article is basically wrong. There's a bullet point that isn't accurate. And then the agent, you know, in recognizing they're going to flag the article for update. If you want to move along. And then from here, our agents use the Knowledge app. Sometimes you'll see it called Knowledge in the Context panel to actually add feedback to the article. And here they're saying, hey, the information number 3 is no longer applicable, and it's providing some more specific guidance there. And if you want to move along. And then from there, the flag is either taken care of by our team if it's one of our articles, or, you know, in this case, we routed the flag to the product documentation team, and they go ahead and fix the article. And that's kind of a quick look at the solve loop in action. And the evolve loop is something that is a lot more of a reflective thing. It's not done in the moment. A lot of times it helps bail us out for the things that the solve loop misses. So if you can go ahead to the next slide. So yeah, it's all about analyzing your content, figuring out how it's performing and how it can improve. A lot of people think of KCS as just the solve loop, but the evolve loop is really such a huge part of what our team does. We're constantly monitoring our content health, kind of how our articles are doing. We're reviewing customer interactions and locating gaps in content that the solve loop missed originally. We're doing kind of assessment of the teams and individuals that are working in the solve loop to see if things are being followed. And a big one there, the last one, with leadership and communication, we're always communicating the results of our analysis across the program. So advocates know how they're doing and how their articles are doing, and also leaders know the value of the KCS program as well. And then here's a quick run through the evolve loop in action. We start by determining some of the biggest ticket drivers. As you can see here, we just have a simple explore report to do that. You'll hear a lot more about this from Katie in a minute. You can go along. And then from there, we're just reviewing customer interactions from that topic area. We're basically saying, hey, this customer has a question. What is the answer to that question? And do we have that documented right now? As you can see in the second kind of picture example there, a lot of times we'll work out of like a spreadsheet where we, you know, are saying, is this documented? If so, here's the existing article. If it's not, we kind of brainstorm ideas of whether we should be making a new article for that or maybe fixing an old one, all those kind of things. Alrighty. And then from there, we are taking action. We're creating a variety of content after we've identified these gaps. Maybe it's articles, maybe it's videos. There's all kinds of things. We try to keep a pretty open mind about what can come out of these analysis. Alrighty. And then finally, we report on the results. There's all kinds of ways to report on these, whether it be article views, the total time to resolution on tickets in this area afterwards. There's all kinds of fun metrics that you can dig into. And yeah, with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass the baton over to Katie, who's going to take a little bit of a deeper dive into the evolve loop.
Cool. Thank you, Ben. You can go on to the next slide. I'm going to share how we do the evolve loop here at Zendesk, taking what Ben just shared and giving you some examples of how we do it here. So our first step is analyzing customer interactions. And if you can move to the next slide, the important thing that we start with is like, how do you pick a topic? How do we identify and categorize the questions that our users are asking? So we recommend, for those of you getting started, it can be something as simple as a subject area ticket field. So this is something you could do right now in Zendesk. You can add a field to a ticket for your agents to fill out, and it does offer a manual categorization of tickets. As we've iterated on this process, we're finding more automated ways to do this, but for those of you getting started, a ticket category is great. And what that allows you to do is on the right, you see a screenshot of an Explore report. And what we're doing is we're comparing one subject field to another. You can also look at them over time. And this is how we decide where should we focus our efforts, where are we getting the highest volume of questions from our customers. If you move on to the next slide, I want to show all the different tools that we use at Zendesk to first pick a topic area and then dive into the tickets themselves. So as I mentioned, we're using Explore, a simple subject area by ticket volume report. From there, we can actually move into Guide. And I don't know if all of you are familiar with the content queues feature, but this uses natural language processing, and it bubbles up and groups tickets together in a way that is showing you customers are asking a lot of the same questions on this topic, and it allows you to click into them, see all of these examples of tickets, and really just dive into topics that you're being told are being asked by your customers. So we always look at tickets. They're the main input for us, but I want to emphasize that we also ask our partners across the business where we should focus our efforts. We work closely with the community team. We look at community posts. One big thing that we do is we survey our agents. They're the ones on the front lines speaking to our customers. So we very often ask them where we should focus our efforts and where our knowledge is lacking. We also look internally at Slack conversations. We ask our product teams. Basically, we just encourage you to look for all the inputs across your company where you can understand what your customers are struggling with, and then where you can create knowledge to help fill those gaps. You move on to the next slide, we have a few screenshots of what this might look like. So in the top left, you're seeing a screenshot of the Explore report where we noticed over time, month over month, our customers were asking us lots of questions on our chat product. And then on the top right, we also were reaffirmed with our decision to focus in on this topic because we saw many content queues related to your chat account. And so we had a bunch of tickets from the Explore report. We also had tickets to dive into from the content queue. And the content queue offers an additional layer of help because it shows customer language and keywords and phrases that people are using. So those are really important because that might become the title of an article later. It helps improve the findability on Google for the article. So we're really, really focusing in on the customer language, and content queues really helps us do that. So if you go to the next slide, we've picked our topic area, we know where to focus, and now how do we analyze it, and then what are we looking for? So we are diving into tickets. Our team is reading tickets, we're understanding what the customers are asking, and however you want to organize this is fine. We started out in a spreadsheet and have moved on to more ways of automating this, but a spreadsheet is great and it allows you to look at the customer language. So a few things that we look at is what is the customer pain and why are they contacting us? And then we also group those questions in a way where we're like, what topics are they contacting us about? And what words and phrases are they using? Again, a big emphasis on customer language. And from there, we move into what was the resolution of the ticket and could it have been self-serviceable? So does the answer to that customer question already exist somewhere in our knowledge base? We also look into how our answer bot performed and if the content was already available. So this is our way of really getting into the tickets and clustering them and categorizing them in ways that help us understand trending topics and big themes that our customers are struggling with. Now, if you go to the next slide, Ben's going to jump in and talk about the specific content that comes out of this, all of the knowledge that we create. But I really want to emphasize that you are on the ground floor reading your customers' questions, understanding their language. So one big thing that we take out of this evolved loop analysis is we have big understanding of the topics and themes that customers are asking us. So it allows us to write more at a high level about specific themes and identify gaps in knowledge. And we also take a screenshot like this and share it with other teams at Zendesk so they can help us brainstorm areas where we can help improve our customers' experience. So in this screenshot, we were passing along feedback that customers on a specific topic were struggling with something that is broken. So we were able to take that directly to product and show them examples where customers are struggling, and they were able to act on it in their own way. And we were able to document solutions in the Help Center and create videos and articles to support it as well. So many teams across Zendesk are benefiting from these analyses and taking action on a lot of our findings. And now I will pass it over to Ben quickly to talk about some of the actions that come out of this analysis.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks a lot, Katie. So if you want to go along to the next slide here, this is a quick kind of snapshot of all the possible things that usually come out of our analysis work. But I also want to stress that you shouldn't limit yourself by this either. There's all kinds of things that also can happen here. But for us, I mean, the top one is the primary one. We get a lot of article updates and brand new articles created. The same thing for videos. And we also recommend a lot of improvements to our chatbot team. One of my favorite parts of our analysis that we do is we look at the beginning of the ticket interaction. And in our case, our team has a chatbot implemented. So we can kind of grade it and see how it's doing and then pass along feedback and say, oh, it should have served this article instead of this one. Or maybe encourage them to develop an entirely kind of automated chat flow to walk someone through an issue if we see it coming up over and over again. I mentioned this earlier, but we also have kind of a direct line to our product teams where we're able to present them kind of a slide deck of kind of the ups and downs of the analysis and where that the product can improve. Well, the first time we did this, the product team, I think their exact quote was, "This is a gold mine," and it absolutely is. There's a lot of value there. We also developed some in-product tutorials from this. We try to gauge places in product where it would be helpful to have something pop up right there to help someone instead of even having them go to an article. And last but not least, training team feedback. We are looking at customer interactions. Sometimes we see issues where maybe our customer support team is answering the question the same way every time, and maybe there's a different way. So sometimes we just pass that along and say, maybe when you train customer service, they can handle things a different way. It's not about getting people in trouble. It's just kind of about passing along that kind of feedback. And if you want to move along to the next slide. And this is just kind of an example spreadsheet of of an analysis, or not a spreadsheet, but a graph that shows the percentage of all these things that come out. As you can see, article updates and brand new articles are the biggest pieces of the pie, but there's a lot of other little things that are factored in here. And with that, I will pass it back to Katie.
Cool. Thank you, Ben. So let's get into the reporting, how we're sharing our findings and communicating what we're doing to leadership. I know there's a lot of questions in the Q&A about this, so I'll touch on it, and then I'm excited to talk about it in the Q&A as well. But the one, I want to flash this in front of you as a reminder that the Evolve Loop started with a subject area field, and on the left-hand side, all of this data and analysis went into it. Again, the primary focus was on support tickets, but you can have all of these other customer inputs that are helping you understand what people are struggling with, and more things to analyze to understand their language and their questions. And on the right, you have what came out of this analysis, the content creation. Again, mostly articles and new videos and everything that we populate our knowledge base with. But there are a lot of other results that can come out of this Evolve Loop analysis. So this alone is something that we share with our leadership. It's the story of all of the metrics that went in and all of the content that came out is absolutely worth communicating. The next slide, though, goes into the very specific metrics that our team looks at. So the first big bucket is utilization. We want to understand if people are using our resources, how many views are on an article, plays on a video, searches in our help center, and understand how our content is performing across our knowledge base. The second big bucket is containment. So after someone views a video, reads an article, was their question addressed from beginning to end? In other words, did they not have to reach out and ask follow-up questions? So if our resources do answer your questions from beginning to end, that's amazing, and we consider that a win, and we've contained the question. If not, that brings us to the final category of reduce the total time to resolve a ticket. So what we're hoping here is that the content that we put out into the world is educating our customers, getting rid of some of those most basic questions, and allowing people to come into their ticket with an agent with a higher level of understanding, and it hopefully decreases the amount of time it takes to resolve a ticket. The final screenshot I want to show here, and I've removed the X and Y axes here, but it was tracking week over week month over month, the volume of tickets we were getting on a specific subject area. So our team was noticing a big spike. We were seeing lots more questions come in. Again, our advocates were manually just quickly checking a field that said, on this topic, we're seeing more and more tickets month over month. So our team decided to do an analysis and understand what these tickets were about and where there were gaps. We published a bunch of content in about a 1 to 2 week time frame. And then after that, we are observing the ticket decrease. Again, we want to emphasize here that content has a long lifespan. It takes a long time for it to be findable and for it to do its thing and work and get in front of the right customers. So it's really important to set expectations with your leaders on how long and how long it will take for the content to make its impact. But just wanted to show you a visual of how we're thinking about this and how we're considering the content successful in reaching customers and making an impact. And I know we have some FAQs to share. Dave, can we jump into these?
Unmute myself. Sure. Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So yes, please. Would you like me to read them?
Well, yeah.
So,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead.
Yeah, it looks like first there's just a few that me and Katie are each going to share a few.
Yeah, great.
Kind of best practices here. So yeah, if you want to go to the next slide here. So probably this is I think the most important one generally with KCS is that I'll always be leveraging like members of your support staff for help on complex topics. In the middle of when we're doing a lot of this analysis work, a lot of it is tied to topics that maybe people on this team are not super familiar with. It's really good to have a good relationship with. And in the background, I think one of my cats is about to throw up. So we're doing it live here. Yeah, it's just important to be really embedded with your support staff and make sure that they're available to help with some of those tougher topics. So if you want to go along to the next slide. So with this, we always recommend kind of living and dying by a very detailed content standard. This helps for translation. This helps for customer clarity and engagement. So yeah, we have a very long kind of meticulous content standard. This is something that helps us with everything we do with KCS and on our team in general. You can go ahead to the next slide. And the last one I'll be talking about before I turn it over to Katie for a few is that robots can only tell you part of the story. Even with machine learning and AI, there's still so much value to you getting into the tickets and reading them and understanding your customer's exact verbiage and pain points. AI is, of course, a big part of what we do as a growing company. But yeah, always do not be afraid to get your hands dirty. And I'll turn it over to Katie for the last three.
Perfect. Yeah. So the next one here, you can go to the next slide. Perfect. So this one is to keep an open mind about what can come out of the evolved loop analyses. As we do these, a lot of people on our team are experts on their topic, and you might think, I'm about to look at this group of tickets on this topic and I know exactly what's going to come out of it. I know what articles I need. And we're always pleasantly surprised and corrected with our expectations. So that's just something to remember, is that let the customer tell you what they're struggling with and try to let go some of those preconceived notions about what you think, what articles you think you're about to write or what videos you're about to create. We really let the customers drive what goes into our knowledge base. And then the last bullet point there is specifically product feedback. Our team has a close connection to our product team at Zendesk. And so we're the ones reading tickets. We're the ones understanding what they're struggling with. And we want to put articles and videos out there into the world. We also want to make direct changes in our product. Next one here is to over-communicate and set expectations on success metrics. So again, content has a long lifespan. You put something out there and it's going to take a while for it to become findable and for it to be used. And so you want to see those metrics over the lifetime of the content and not expect to see 1,000 views on an article tomorrow and therefore 1,000 less tickets. So that's just something to communicate early and often to your leaders. And then our final one here is just to share your findings internally. While our team's focus is on knowledge management, on articles, on videos, you'd be surprised how many other people across your company are really interested in learning these customer pain points, and we're solving the customer pain through knowledge. They might solve the customer pain points in other ways. And so it's just very valuable to continue to spread the wealth of knowledge across your organization.
Awesome. Thanks, Katie, and thanks, Ben. And now we'll move on to the Q&A portion of our presentation here. So I'm going to read questions, and Katie, Ben, and Niall, you'll be answering them. So let's go. All right. So how do you get engineers to write KB articles?
Yeah. So for this one, this is a great question, and one of the first things I'll call out here is what we try to do with our kind of knowledge management process is to remove a lot of the burden from engineers and our customer service teams so that they don't have to be burdened with knowing all of our content standard and know how to format every single thing. Usually the thing I say to someone that's brand new at creating content here is just get the knowledge down and we'll make it pretty. So our team or one of our dedicated knowledge champions will do that. And then from there, we have some processes too, where let's say if one of our support staff tries to write an article and maybe they don't feel confident on a few things, sometimes we'll route this over to an engineer and say, hey, does this look good? Do you want to add something here? But also the last thing I'll say here is that a lot of the engineers are really eager to share this knowledge because they have a very advanced skill set, and we've had a lot of good luck with that as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. And just everyone, please keep your questions coming to the Q&A tab. We're working through those. And if we do get through all of our pre-submitted questions on the slides here, we'll try to cover as many of those as we can. And if we can't cover them here live, we'll answer as many of them as we can when we send out the link to the recording and stuff like that later this week. All right, next question. How do you use search metrics for content ideas?
Yeah, I can answer that one. So because our site is public, we have two options. We can use the search data set in Explore, and we can examine also the Search Console from Google. We focus for now on the Search Console or the data set in Explore. We can see what term was used, the click-through percentage, and then where it actually ended up. So we would look through, a large spreadsheet of information to see did that term that the customer used, did it surface the right information? And if it did, wonderful. If it didn't, then we need to look at how we can improve that article or create new content.
So thanks, Niall. Next question. Any insights on how to segment our help center between public documentation and restricted documentation? Some of our documentation should ideally be restricted to a specific audience and not visible to all users.
I'll take this one. So we use user segments to partition our help center to different groups, specifically internal facing versus publicly facing. We have internal sections of our help center, and those are marked with the IKB, internal knowledge base. And those are only for people at Zendesk to view, for internal processes that our agents use. And so none of that is ever publicly facing. And then the rest of the content has its sections and categories that are available to our customers. This is really wonderful for us to train our advocates because they can search in the help center and they can come across an article that's publicly available. They can also come across one that is internal. So it's a centralized place. So our advocates are always looking at our help center, and they can look internally or publicly facing.
Awesome. Thanks. Thanks, Katie. Let's get to the next question here. Some of our agents haven't specialized in content writing. How do you make sure content quality is good while connecting them with the process of creating and updating content? Ben, this sounds like similar to the engineer's question there.
Yeah, and I'd say I'd echo what Ben was saying there. We encourage them to share their knowledge in a raw form and not to bother too much about the packaging. We have the knowledge champions who are experienced in this kind of work, so they can make the content look pretty. But what the main focus is to capture the knowledge at this point.
Awesome. Thanks, Now. All right, next question. Can you share something on user permission management, article publishing, and approval flows?
Yeah, I'd be glad to take this one. So our structure we have for kind of user permissions, or the different roles we have for KCS at Zendesk, we have, as soon as someone starts as kind of a support agent, they're trained in what's called like a contributor role. As a contributor, you're able to flag articles. You're also able to submit suggestions for new articles, but you're not really going in there and directly doing it yourself. Once you're more comfortable, you kind of graduate to what's called like an advanced contributor. And from there, those are people that get a little more training, and then they go ahead and can actually draft articles from scratch. And then from there, it's important to note that even these users they're not hitting the final publish button, because again, we're not training them on every part of our translation processes and things like that. So we utilize team publishing, and they just hit a button that says submit for review. And then either someone from our team or one of our dedicated knowledge champions goes ahead and takes a look at that and then hits the final publish button.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Ben. As Bill Decker says, complete thoughts, not complete sentences. Don't worry about making the sentence complete. Just get the thought down. We'll make it pretty, right? All right. Next question. What is the most efficient workflow for getting out-of-date articles reviewed and assigned?
I will take that one as well. This is another really good question. We also, again, we use the team publishing feature to allow agents to create new articles or update existing ones without publishing them. In this way, our knowledge champions, which I didn't really elaborate a bunch on what a knowledge champion is, but they're basically a support agent that is trained very extensively on our content standards, so they can go ahead and help in these areas. And then from there, they go ahead and make the fixes. Another really important thing to note here is that we don't stress about everything being 100% up to date all the time. That's almost impossible to do. Our product changes a lot. So we really rely on the solve loop for people to, flag articles and say, hey, this is out of date. To be clear, we definitely try to catch a lot of things, especially with big changes. But a big part of KCS is just kind of taking a part of your hand off the wheel and just kind of relaxing and just knowing that it's not always going to be perfect, but your agents will spot things that are wrong because they're looking at the articles all the time.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. All right, next question. How can I use content queues and make AnswerBot improvements?
I'll take this one, and it's an interesting one because these are two different features working separately, but I understand how you're wanting to use them together. So from the content queues perspective, you're diving into them one by one, resolving them as you go through to understand clusters of tickets and to understand where there might be opportunity for new topics of articles, new sections of your knowledge base. And then from there, you're getting content ideas on, and we call this, as we call it, feeding the bot. So you're coming up with ideas on how to write for the answer bot, use customer language, because as you can imagine, a customer is typing in, how do I build this Explore report? And you want to make sure you have an article answering, how do I build an Explore report? So together with content queues, you can use the customer language that comes out of them to come up with answer bot improvement ideas and feed the bot.
Awesome. Thanks, Katie.
Yeah.
All right. Next question. How do you get insights into how effective your content is? Page views and likes do not tell the whole story.
Yeah, I can take that one. So you can combine information from Explore with Google Analytics information. So we're getting more acquainted with Google Analytics 4 recently. We still have an account in Google Analytics 3, so we can look at sessions, we can look at views, but we can also look at engagement in GA4 now. And we can also look at custom events, so we can create specific events to track, like somebody else mentioned earlier, tracking video views, but also some of our articles have buttons, and they also have hover kind of things in them, and also it tracks scrolling. So any kind of interaction with the page you can track using custom events in Google Analytics.
Awesome. Thanks, Niall.
No problem.
All right. Next question. How do you communicate the impact of smaller changes, as in the impact on an individual article basis, to show that you're moving the needle on a smaller scale, not just overall?
Be glad to take this one. So this is probably my favorite question in the deck. I think with KCS, a lot of people don't understand how impactful recognition is. And a lot of people think that there needs to be monetary rewards for participating in a program, but you'll be surprised how powerful it is to just like post in a public Slack channel to say, hey, this person wrote this article. It's got this many views in the last month, like, or it did like this many tickets. All the agents that I've talked to, or actually when I was a support agent, this was very effective with me. And we try to constantly communicate these kind of things to our support staff and their managers to let them know about the impact that they're having. Sometimes we even, I'll kind of upskill our knowledge champions on how to build reports in Explore and kind of share them in their own team meetings and shout out their own team members and things like that. So that's most of our strategy on that.
Yeah, I'd just like to jump in there on that one. I think it's important for managers as well to jump on the bandwagon with these kinds of things. We need to create a knowledge sharing culture. So when we see positive stories or encouraging stories where knowledge was shared and we had a win, managers should jump in there and help celebrate those moments and encourage more of them.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben and Niall. Next question. What are the best practices for using the knowledge capture app in support?
All right, this is me. The long and short of it is actually don't use it anymore. So right now, the knowledge capture app, it's still going for now, but recently we rolled out the knowledge app, or knowledge in context panel. It's got it's got all the functionality of the knowledge capture app has. A few times it looks a little different, but it's got a lot of improvements too. It's got better search. So first of all, definitely recommend looking into using that. As far as particular best practices, it's such a big question that I'd be interested in anyone that wants to know more about this to kind of put some more individual questions about it in the Q&A section, because there's so much I could talk about here that I'd like a little more focused. Otherwise, I'll ramble on forever.
Awesome. All right, thanks, Ben. All right, next question. What's the best way to manage information to make it easier to onboard new support reps?
I'll take this one. It kind of goes back to one of the other Q&A questions about how we have our internal knowledge base and our publicly facing one. So there's a big emphasis here that your agents don't need to remember everything. They just need to be able to find it and find it quickly and then follow what's in the articles. So having that IKB and a publicly facing documentation in the same place allows your agents to just search in one search bar and come across all the content they might need. We write our internal articles almost the same way we write our publicly facing ones. So simple, plain English. We follow templates. We write in the customer words and in this sense, the agent words. So if the agents need to know, how do I do this internal process? We will have articles titled that. So the same way we do that in our publicly facing help center. So just continuing to practice those KCS best practices and have templates and writing standards in place.
Awesome.
One thing I'll add on here is that your newer support agents are very similar to your customers with the way they ask questions. They're new at using the product. So they're some of the best people to kind of pilot a lot of these articles too. So just keep in mind that your agents are going to be using your public facing help center about as often as they use the internal one a lot of the time. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, I can throw in a couple of comments on that too. I've done this a few times for onboarding, and I've even moved a lot of the training material in various knowledge bases that I've built entirely into the knowledge base, removing any kind of duplicate kind of decks and things like that. Not for everybody, but what I would say is using the knowledge base for onboarding can reduce onboarding as much as 50% as it did in my case. So from 4 weeks down to 2 weeks. So it is very, very beneficial.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. All right. Next question. What mistakes have you made while implementing knowledge management, and how did you correct them?
I can take that one. So I've been doing this about 6 or 7 years now, and I built a number of knowledge bases on a number of different platforms, not just on Zendesk. And on one occasion, I did not give reporting, I think, the focus it deserved. I was told by developers and people who were building it, oh, don't worry, it's all pre-built, it's all ready and waiting for you, and don't worry about it. And I had made customizations in certain areas of the build, and when I went to run those reports, they didn't run because my customizations had kind of kicked them out. So what I would say is, as you're building, as you're working on your knowledge base, look at the kind of information that you want to be reporting on. Look at the information you want to, that you need to know, that you want to report on. Don't just grab random numbers and things like that. They have to actually be useful. You have to use them for something, but do it as you're building. So you always have that information at hand, ready to share, to divulge. In the knowledge management space, we're always expected to kind of prove everything as much as we can. It is a wide area, and it can be difficult to prove kind of penetration and impact in some ways. But thankfully, with Explore, and now obviously with Google Analytics, we really are getting to a place where we can show exactly how effective the knowledge base can be.
Fantastic. Thanks, Niall. All right, next question. Do you have any tips for managing complex troubleshooting with knowledge articles?
This is a great question because the more complex troubleshooting articles are usually what comes out of an evolve loop analysis. During the solve loop, you're capturing a lot of those short Q&As, FAQ type questions, and during the evolve loop, we're writing a lot of the longer troubleshooting pieces of documentation. So some tips that we have when writing these is we use the Zendesk Garden features. So we are trying to organize the content in ways that are easy for people to understand, make it interactive, and allow people to, check boxes as they're going through and reading the complex troubleshooting article. We also have had a lot of success when we start to use a lot more images, very targeted images of our product, so we can walk people through step by step and with text, and show them with either a video or a screenshot of what they should be doing in the product. So yeah, great question.
Awesome. Thanks, Katie. All right, and the last of our pre-submitted questions that we're covering today here. One of the guiding principles of KCS is that agents should be drafting articles as they work tickets and updating as they go every time they gather more information. How do you do that at Zendesk?
Yeah, be glad to take this one. So, well, one of the things that we try to keep in mind is that when a support agent starts, when they're brand new, they can be a little overwhelmed. So one of the things that, we definitely train them on a lot of KCS practices right away, but we kind of limit their training to flagging articles and just suggesting new articles. In other words, saying, hey, there should be an article about this, and not taking time to write it. As agents become more kind of seasoned, we kind of hope to transition them into being advanced contributors. And then they're a little better at managing their time. They have more time built in to do these things. And some of them are even here what we call swarmers, where they have a lot of their time is spent helping other people with their tickets. So they have a little more flexibility in their day. They also have more time to do those kind of practices as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. All right. So that is all of the pre-submitted questions. We've got a little bit of time here. So yes. So here's a question from the chat, and thanks everybody for submitting these questions. So how do you handle and manage content translations? Or is that something that you do? I know that our documentation team does translations of our official documentation. Do you do any? Do we do any on the self-service side?
Yes, so we actually use a vendor, and kind of we go by the 80-20 rule, which is pretty prevalent in KCS, which is that the top 20% of articles are translated by a human, and then the other 80% are machine translated, and that's a principle that we use for our content. But yeah, we do use a vendor for that.
And I'll add on that that's the important content standard. We have a very robust content standard, and that's what makes this machine translation possible, is that we're following very detailed instructions of what can be bolded or italicized and capitalized. And so that really helps make translation easier by following a writing standard.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you. All right. How about this question? What are your tips and best practices for creating audio or visuals? Sorry, I'm going to try that again. Take two. What are your tips and best practices for creating videos and visual content? Video length, audio with the video, like what standards do you use for those?
I can take that one. So we're kind of experimenting a little bit on this at the moment. We've had varying different, types of videos that we use on our site, some 10-minute videos, from 20-minute videos in some cases. And we're trying to squeeze those down. I think a lot of people are becoming more accustomed to shorter videos on one particular topic. But we're also trying to cater for people where they are in the particular troubleshooting phase. So let's say we're covering a particular topic. We might say, we'll set the expectation first. We'll say, this is a 2-minute video or a 3-minute video. And we'll add chapters to that, because there could be stages within the troubleshooting phase. So there could be step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's 5 minutes. So if I'm at phase step 3, I can skip to that chapter and just listen to that, because we were looking at how people were looking at the videos. Some people were falling off after 50% of the video. Some people were falling off at 75% into that video.
Awesome. Oh, and Niall, looks like your video might have frozen. So if you want to try resetting yourself there.
I wanted to add one thing to the video piece, Dave, is that coming out of an Evolve loop, as I'm sure you all know, it takes a lot of work to make a video. It's a lot longer than creating an article. So there's a lot of justification that goes into making a video. Are there a significant amount of questions on it? Is that part of the product planned to change at any point in time? So just keep in mind when you're making videos that they're harder to update in the future, and you just need to justify why you're making them. And I think they're a great medium, but we just always put some extra thought into, should this just be an article or should it be a video?
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks. Here's another question. Do you have best practices for keeping track of which articles need to be updated when a process or a product feature changes?
Yeah, so I can take that one. At this point, there is some manual stuff required here. It's impossible to completely automate it at the moment. A lot of times, what we've done is when a product change happens, we'll take a quick look at the help center section that's appropriate and quickly grab a list of articles that are relevant, and then do a quick scan through. I know we are hoping to use content blocks in the future, perhaps, to make some of this easier. We just haven't fully implemented that on our side yet, because so many articles have been made without them in the past. But I think content blocks are going to be one of your best friends with this going forward.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks, Ben. And I just want to give you all props as we're going here. Like, the questions on the slides were ones that we've seen ahead of time and had time to think about. And you guys answering questions live with your faces on camera. Extra props here for that. All right. Another question. How can we know that the articles are helpful for end users?
I can answer that one, I think, Katie looks enthusiastic about answering it, but maybe you can jump in. But essentially, we can see, and I think Katie mentioned it earlier, we can see using data, we can see the view, and then we can see, was there, like, if we, let's say, stay in the knowledge base for a second, we can see that they viewed the article, we can see how long people have stayed on the article, so we can see the average time that somebody's been on an article. Usually, I would say if the average time on an article is 1 minute or more, we're definitely seeing that it's effective. And then if there are videos or other elements that are on the page, that they're being clicked. But we can also see if a ticket later has been raised by that customer. So we can follow that journey and actually see how effective it's being. Katie?
Awesome. Thanks, Niall.
You said,
Oh, Katie, go ahead.
yeah, no, I think you captured most of everything I was going to say. I was also just going to emphasize that after an evolve loop analysis, we have this list of articles, videos, other pieces of content that we put out into the world. And so we do look at reports specifically with those article URLs. How are they performing? How are people clicking on the elements in those articles to understand if they're impactful and if people are engaging with them? So we do like hyper focus in on the ones that we put out together in like a 1 to 2 week period of time that we publish together.
Awesome. Thanks, Katie. So there are so many other great questions in the chat, and we're not going to be able to get to all of those live here today, but we will include answers to as many of those as we can when we send out the information, the link to the recording and stuff like that later this week. But for now, so let's cover one last live questions, and here it is. How do you avoid isolating knowledge between departments when authoring primarily with Zendesk? Some groups in my org do not use Zendesk, and currently we have to duplicate a lot of knowledge in multiple systems.
I think I can answer that, but I would just, my internet, I think, is a bit, one of the, if you imagine knowledge management as a three-legged stool, Katie and Ben are going to start laughing because I'm always giving this analogy, but you have to imagine knowledge management as a three-legged stool. You've got good governance, good taxonomy, and then you need user engagement. So to try and answer this question, you need to try and reach out to other departments and build relationships with those people and encourage them to begin to work with you and engage with your knowledge base.
All right. Well, thank you, Ben and Katie and Niall for the excellent presentation and all of these amazing answers. And thanks everybody for tuning in.